Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar. My name is Andrew Townsend. I'm with eLearning Brothers. Today's session is going to be a tale of two courses, instructional design challenges, constraints, and decisions. We're excited that you've joined us today, or if you're watching the recording, we hope you get what you'd like out of this session. This session will be recorded. We'll post the recording on our blog, as I mentioned, as well as on our YouTube channel later in the week. If you have questions during the webinar or comments, or you'd like to interact with our presenters, please do use the questions panel, and we'll get to as many of your comments and questions as we can. If there's some that we can't answer live, we will try to get those answered for you offline. All right, so to talk to us today, we have Chris Willis, Senior Product Manager, and Josh Bledgy, Learning Designer with us today, both with eLearning Brothers. Thanks for both of you for joining us, and I'll go ahead and turn the time over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrew and Josh. So I'll get us started here. And all right, so our agenda for today in this session, as we talked about, is going to be a tale of two courses. And we're going to kind of give you a glimpse into our world and the back end in the product world. Josh and I work on the product side for Customizable Courseware. We design and are part of the development team for Customizable Courseware. We know firsthand what it's like to have to meet deadlines and budgets and all those pesky constraints that get in the way from the idea in your head of the course you imagine and then getting that out into the course, into real life. So today what we're going to do is kind of look at those constraints. We're going to put a name to them and bring them out in front of us out of the darkness so that we can see them and come up with some strategies to slay them. And then we'll give you some ideas about how we handled some particular constraints about two courses in our safety and compliance library here for Customizable Courseware. So here we go. Before we get started, I always like to know, who do we have here on the call? If you could, Andrew, take it away.
Yep, that is right on the screen. Go ahead and click what best describes your role in designing learning. Are you an instructional designer trainer, e-learning developer, learning manager, business consultant, or other? And of course, you can use that questions panel to fill us in on the other. It looks like most of you have already voted here. Some of you are still typing into the questions panel what your role is. We've got an LMS coordinator. We've got an all of the above. One-man shop. I'll go ahead and close this out and share those results here. All right, so 53% of our audience, instructional designers, trainers, 22% e-learning developers, 14% learning managers, 6% business or consultant, and then 4% others. And I would imagine the others are either LMS coordinators or pretty much all of the aboves.
Super. So as I go through these constraints, those of you who are instructional designers, trainers, e-learning developers, these are going to feel very familiar to you. And I'll be asking for some of your feedback into how you experience them in your world. Learning managers, as we present these constraints, be thinking about your role in how you can help break these blockers and help your folks work more efficiently and help get things out of their way. Or if when things are impossible to get out of the way, to help empower them to power through despite the challenges that they're facing. Okay, for your experience level, let's hit this one more time here.
All right, so that is right up there on the screen. You can click directly on it. What best describes you? Are you new? Do you have some experience with course authoring? Are you just curious about the topic, just getting started? Maybe you're an eLearning Brothers rock star. You've been using eLearning Brothers for a long time, and you know your tools. You've come to a lot of webinars. You've learned a lot about them, or others. So do let us know. Looks like a lot of you have checked in already. Looks a couple more wandering in. All right, and here's those results right there. 54% experienced and feeling constrained, though. 25% are curious about the topic. We've got 10% eLearning Brothers rock stars. Welcome, everybody. 8% who are new to course authoring, and then 2% that are something else. And some of the comments that have come to the questions panel: I've been developing courses for over 20 years before I knew what instructional design was. That is quite an other.
Yes.
That is not unique in the world. What's really interesting is we're part of a very unique profession. Many of us start out in we come in through different ways, okay? Some of us come in, Josh has experience in usability and interface design and user experience, and that's where he comes in and kind of got sucked into learning from the learner experience aspect, and is training in instructional design, actually has been training in instructional design for some time now. And then some of us come from the business and we're pulled in off the floor and we learn the tools and the things we need that way. Some of us come in from being facilitators and stand-up trainers, and then our organization moves to e-learning. So it's not unusual that we may be very high in experience in one arena in our life and one aspect of our career, and then in another aspect in the learning world come in and have varying degrees of experience with tools or facilitation or instructional design. So thank you for sharing that. That really helps me when I'm talking to you, and then I can speak more personally to you. So I really appreciate that. Okay, so what is a constraint anyway? When we talk about a constraint in terms of a project, what are we really talking about here? So the definition of constraint is really a limitation or a restriction. It's anything that's going to put a pinch on you doing what you imagine that you want to do with your, in the case of e-learning, with your course. So it's something that's going to put a box around your mental idea of what you want to create and get in the way of that coming to reality. Okay. So when we look at from a project management standpoint, there's a classic triple constraint model that applies. Okay. And we say that the scope of your project controls and is controlled by the time that you have, your deadline to complete the project, and also the cost of the project or your budget to complete the project. And those three things kind of play together. So if your project scope is really huge, but you have a very limited time and a very limited budget, that's going to put a huge constraint on what you can complete or the quality of your output, right? And vice versa. If you have a very enormous budget and a small scope, you can do whatever you want. In fact, that's kind of a recipe to go off the rails sometimes and get into scope creep, right? Because things tend to fill the void that you create for them. In reality, how the triple constraint model plays out, and you've probably seen this before, it usually plays out as good, fast, cheap, pick two, okay? So you can make something good and cheap, but you can't put a hurry up on it because it's going to take you more time. And if you want something good and fast, it probably won't be cheap. And you see that a lot of times when you're doing something with custom and you want to put a real super fast, tight deadline on it. A lot of times your developer will ask for a premium because they're going to have to throw more resources on it. They might have to ask for OT, and those kind of constraints typically then tend to raise your budget. So what are your kind of, just off the cuff, thinking about it, what are your top e-learning project constraints? Use the question panel and give us some of yours.
We'll give you guys a couple moments to type those out and send them in.
Thinking of things related to time, to budget, to project scope. We'll dig into these a little bit more, but just off the cuff, what are you thinking about?
Human resources, I am a department of one. Another one, subject matter expert availability. Budget, time, resources. We're constrained to very strict marketing and branding rules. The learner's time. Yeah, lots and lots of time. Time to make courses. Time to get the learners to pay attention and take the courses. Video takes too long to upload onto other software. Difficult internet connection. Layers of complexity between our groups and the rest of the organization. Subject matter expert response time. People saying, I want it now, but I also want it to be extremely accurate. So yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of echoed concerns here.
Yeah, those all sound familiar. I think we've heard about 90% of those ourselves here.
Yes. Yes. We can't make that decision. We can't make that decision. We're waiting for that decision. We can't make that decision. Okay, the decision's made. When do you want it? Last week, right? Yes, always, right? Right. So very much thank you for sharing those. I really appreciate them because you've hit on a lot of them that many of us face the same kind of constraints. You know, I don't have the budget. I'm not sure how to do that. Our learners need different things. How are we going to keep 10 courses consistent? How are we possibly going to do that? And then, like, from the standpoint of how these turn up as blockers, what we see are the kinds of things that you all were talking about, which is we see deadlines, impossible deadlines or improbable deadlines, and then budget, staffing. Somebody mentioned HR and staffing. I'm a team of one. We have many of you who are a team of one, who are eLearning Brothers rock stars, and we feel your pain and try to do everything we can. In fact, you're one of the reasons that we work as hard as we do, because we try to give you everything you can to help you do the impossible last week with this much budget. Yeah. Skills and expertise. What you want to create or need to create, you may not yourself or have on your team the people who have the right skills. This happens a lot when you're changing technologies and you're in the midst of learning something new while trying to continue and keep your workload going and meet leadership expectations. Josh is smiling because, yes, we feel that pain too. Delivery requirements. Somebody mentioned something with I think they said something with their LMS, certain technologies. I've heard in the past from webinars, some of our audience, somebody said we have to do everything in SharePoint. SharePoint is our learning tool, and that's our delivery environment. And I've worked for organizations in my past life where we were constrained by working in a SharePoint environment. Why? Because it's secure, and it's the delivery platform that everybody has when they open up their desktop, and that is how communications were delivered in some trainings and performance support, and that's what we had. So those are the constraints you have to work within. Definitely a challenge. Brand standards. Somebody else said that. Thank you for saying that. I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize. I've worked with organizations where you could not use animated characters because they felt that their branding really pushed forward real people and images of people using their technology. And so they didn't want to dilute that people message in their brand with using any kind of animations or characters. They had a very strict icon set that we could pull from for imagery. And so, yes, that definitely poses a unique challenge and constraint on the e-learning that you're going to produce. SME availability, over and over again, we heard echoed. SME availability, you can lay out the timeline, the perfect timeline, but if you can't get the approvals and the input that you need to keep the timeline going, that'll sabotage you every time. So SME availability is definitely a project constraint that you have to deal with. And then authoring tools, the tools you have, which kind of goes with like your delivery requirements. They all fall into the technology that constrains what you want to do and what you want to do with it. So thank you for your input. Yes, you definitely underscored. I think I heard every one of these echoed from you. So busting through the blockers, what do we do about it? Okay, so we have these constraints, they're there, they're real. What do we do about it? So here are some kind of tips, and it kind of comes down to, in a lot of ways, how we think about the constraints that are in front of us. And let's look at that. What do I mean by that? So before we get into that, why don't you give me some ideas? What are some of the tough ways, what are some of the ways you try to tackle these constraints in your organization? What are some of the things that you do?
Again, we'll give you guys a couple moments to type in your thoughts. Overcoming constraints.
Yes.
All right, use a rapid authoring tool like Rise 360. Push back on unrealistic deadlines. Yeah, stand up for yourself. That's a good one. Create a prototype without permission.
Ask forgiveness later.
Yeah, push boundaries and get in touch with marketing. Be creative outside of work. With lack of subject matter experts response, I do the research, learn what's needed, and add that. Push management to prioritize the millions of projects so we know what to focus on. Partner with corporate communication staff. Create more micro courses. State expectations clearly to stakeholders and give options. Stay true to process. When possible, I send drafts to subject matter experts with my ideas so they can offer feedback. Lots of good ones.
Those are all good, and they're all good, and they're very prescriptive and tactical, and I appreciate that. Those are all really excellent strategies. Let's take a look at, on a high level, what can help you enable those strategies in your organization. Okay, so first thing, gather the facts and go to the source. I think a lot of times we make assumptions about what's going on and what the real constraints are. Get the real scoop, know what you're truly up against. Sometimes what we imagine to be happening or what looks like what's happening isn't really what's happening. And you know what? If that is really what's happening, it's better to know. Because we all know what happens when we assume, right? So forge ahead. Don't waste time trying to negotiate the non-negotiables. I have a quote about wishing that it comes from my dad that it just goes, you can wish in one hand and then do something else in your other hand and see which one fills up faster, and I'll let you fill in the blanks. But I'll just say there's an emoji for that. But so anyway, but yes, there's this wishing isn't going to do us any good, and literally wearing blinders and trying to pretend that something else is going to happen doesn't help. But our deadlines will move on regardless. So if it is what it is, accept it is what it is, and accept that that's our challenge. That's what we're going to have to deal with. Our SMEs are going to be our SMEs. Our technology is going to be our technology. Sometimes our deadlines will move. The longer you work within an organization or with the same group, you kind of get a sense of a feeling of which ones will and which ones won't. For those that won't, I mean, if there's a rollout and there's something happening, there's an event, and it's going to happen, that deadline isn't going anywhere. So there's nothing we can do about it. Just accept it. Change the story. This is because we need to change fear into action. And what we say about the situation amongst ourselves and to our direct reports what we say and the story we tell about it is the reality of what it is. So if it's, this is impossible, you're setting me up to fail, I'm never going to be able to do this with what you have. It's not a Pollyanna approach to flip that and say, okay, this is what we have. Failure is not an option. You know, what are we going to do here? And to understand that, wow, I'm brilliant. I've come out of worse situations before. I've got this. I can figure this out. Call on what you have in your past and change up the story. It really, really makes a difference, especially for those of you who are leaders. It really makes a difference. Think inside the box. What I mean by that is lay out, we always say think outside the box and don't let your constraints block you. But when you have set constraints and they're here, your job is to bounce around within that box and push the sides of that box to the point that they're about to burst. Use your constraints not as blockers, but as realities, and understand that there are ways to trick software. There are ways, the person who wrote, I pre-write something, I go out and research myself, and I present that to my SME. Do you know what? That is just brilliant, because SMEs will edit anything you put in front of them. But if you ask a SME, well, where's my stuff? Well, where's my course? I can't get started until you give me something. We have to have that interview. I can't do anything. Well, now you're blocking yourself, right? So the minute you put something in front of a SME, they're going to get a pencil, or they're going to go, that's not right. This isn't what we want. You know what? I have 3 articles here. I have this, I have that. When they see what they don't want, they'll respond. So brilliant. That works. It really does. And then lastly, this is my favorite. When I used to lead projects, I used to have people come to me all the time, and I had an open door policy, and it was, Chris, we can't do this. Chris, they're changing the deadline. Chris, I can't get that change of scope. Chris, I can't. And my answer was always, don't tell me what you can't do. Tell me what you can do. We're consultants. It's our responsibility to inform and to help guide the projects that are in front of us. So every time you have an issue, be prepared before you go talk to leadership about that issue. Be prepared to come with at least one proposed solution and push that forward and push that forward instead. Otherwise, you sound like you're whining. You know, we all know we have problems. We have problems every day. And the response from leadership who are they're also pressed. They also have their own blockers and their own deadlines and the other things that they're up against. And their first response is going to be, so what are you going to do about it? So come prepared. Think about that in advance. The minute you think I can't, say, okay, so what is my proposal? What could we do? Well, you know, I can't meet this deadline, but if I had one more resource, you know, for 2 weeks, if we could do this, or if we could send this to somebody else, or if I had this other tool, we could. So don't tell me what we can't do. Tell me what we can do. Okay. Any questions on these before we move on? Questions or comments or feedback? We'll take it all.
No questions at this time, but if any do come up, I'll be sure to let you know.
Fab. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. So now I'm going to turn it over to Josh, and we've looked at some of the constraints that we're up against. We're looked at some of the problems that we face in trying to manage e-learning projects and get them pushed through. We looked at kind of a little bit of a philosophical approach to attacking some of these blockers at a high level. And now we're going to look at, well, what does that look like when we're developing customizable courseware? And Josh is going to show us 2 different courses and tell us about how this played out in between our two storyboards. So go ahead, Josh, it's all yours.
Thanks, Chris. So before we get right into those two courses, I just want to give you a brief introduction to Customizable Courseware if you're not familiar with it very well. So what Customizable Courseware is, it's off-the-shelf courseware, but it's designed to put you as the developer or designer in control of that course. So versus just giving you a course and say, here, plug this into your LMS, well, you can do that with these, but we also give you the option to update your branding guidelines, change out the content that you need. Like, we give you full control over the source file in one of three tools, whatever tool you're going to be using, either Captivate, Lector, or Storyline. So it's more customizable. It's not just a here, dump this over here kind of concept. And in addition to that, we use some other deliverables with it to allow for blended approaches with instructor-led trainings, and as well as like a quiz template and a full transcript that you can hand off to review and whatnot to make easy edits. And people really seem to love that, actually, that feature that we provide with the transcript there. But let's talk about some high-level like realities that we had to face with Customizable Courseware, because you just heard me say three tools, and so we have three development tools that we have to work with, which offers a lot of constraints. Because if you're familiar with any of those three tools or all three of those, you know that they handle things different ways. They don't always do the same thing the same way, and some of them handle things better than others. And we had to find a common denominator between all three to make everything work the exact same way. So basically, we only had a storyboard once and have it developed 3 times. We also had an established set of 508 goals. So we looked at the 508 guidelines and said, okay, which ones of these can we meet through Customizable Courseware without really, like which one of these can we easily meet, and which ones the organization need to do on their own, and how can we set them up for success that way. So we have these 508 goals that we keep in mind, this checklist that we keep in mind the whole time that we're developing new slides, developing new interactions, things like that, to hopefully get you, as close as we can to 508 compliance, and then you can take it the rest of the way with the customizable aspect of the course itself. We also have them XAPI enabled, so they are exported in an XAPI format. So if you do have an LRS, you can get those statements coming out of that as well. They are mobile enabled, so they are responsive depending on which tool they're built in. They handle responsiveness different ways, but they are built to be taken on mobile devices as well. And so we had to keep that in mind as we're looking at different text sizes, things like that might scale down differently. And then again, going back to the 3 tools, we wanted to create a standardized experience across all 3 platforms that we were using, so that way we weren't jipping one development team over another based off of just the tool that they're using to get the same experience that they wanted. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about 2 courses that we developed. These are 2 of our newer releases that have come out this year. These are high on the, these are ones when we say that we'll take requests and we'll make courses that people ask for. These were 2 that were on that list very high because we had several customers from our sales team that really wanted these 2 courses, because these are general topics that pretty much any office, any organization needs. And so we developed both these kind of concurrently with each other to make sure that we're meeting the same, providing what we need to out of both of them to work together as companion courses and help build a curriculum that way. So just to give you kind of a brief overview, first off, these 2 courses they cover some of the same content, but they do meet different audiences. So for new worker, we're looking at an audience of newly hired workers. These are people that may not know anything about your safety procedures in your organization, and we want to make sure that they're educated in those procedures before they start working and potentially get themselves into trouble because they're just inexperienced or unknowledgeable, right? And then for safety attitudes and actions, this is meant as more of a follow-up course for more experienced workers. So you're thinking that 6-month, year mark when they've had experience working down there, and hopefully they're keeping good habits, but maybe they're not. And we want to help course correct at that point, which goes into kind of our goals for these courses. So for new worker, our goal was just to provide that base knowledge that we can build from about safety for that worker as they're going into the organization. But then for safety attitudes and action, we're looking at tuning up and course correcting maybe behavior that's developed that we might not want, or that we need to just make sure that they understand to keep going on that same path, right? And both these courses had, I guess, various different levels of detail as far as the guidelines that we had to build them from. So for like new worker, OSHA provides pretty clear-cut guidelines as to what they want you to teach that worker. And so we made sure we met those guidelines as we developed this course. Versus safety attitudes and actions, they say that you need to do it, and there's a few organizations out there that do provide some guideline to it, but it's really more of a, whatever you think you need to include in this thing. There's no real true compliance standard that we need to meet there. And then these two courses are kind of two different approaches to how you're teaching, versus New Worker was very tactical and knowledge-based, versus Safety Attitudes and Actions, we wanted to make that one behavioral based course where we're trying to change a behavior versus just providing them knowledge. And so they're related, but they're different courses. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the constraints that we face, some of the challenges that we face, and how we address them in both courses, because they had some of the same kind of constraints and challenges, but we handled them different ways. And so these will just give you some examples of things that, as you're approaching roadblocks, things that you can try to do to make sure that you're getting past those roadblocks. Andrew, is there any questions before I move on? Okay. So first off, one of our big questions was, how do we clearly signal what we call the what's in it for me to the two different learner groups? So this is saying, okay, learner, here's what you need to get out of this. And we did this in a couple different ways. And so in all of our courses, if you're familiar with Customizable Courseware, we put what we call an intention getter at the beginning, something that sets up this what's in it for me concept for the learner. And it varies depending on what course it is, on what kind of an activity that's provided with it. So for like new worker, we thought, well, we just need the person to understand the situation that they're in. We want to make sure that they know what they're getting themselves into. So we set up this narrative with this character named Sean, who might be familiar to you from some of our other courses if you're familiar with those. And Sean, we want to make sure that he's safe on his first day of work. So we're like, well, we want to let them give someone that the new worker can relate to. So we put Sean in this situation where he's now communicating with his manager, who we named Angela in this scenario. And we just want to provide them the story of how he progresses through his first day with safety training. But then in safety attitudes and actions, we decided to provide a little bit more activity. Notice Angela's back here, but now she's asking a question, providing this self-reflection question for the learner as they're going through this. And these were used not only as our attention getter, but actually throughout the course in safety attitudes and actions to help them to think about their behavior. And so after showing you the screenshots, I'm just going to show you how we address these actually within the course themselves. So here I'm pulling up, this is new worker safety orientation. And so as the learner comes into the course, they're meeting Sean, getting a little explanation of what's going on with Sean right now. Then they're getting a little introduction to Angela, so Sean's boss. And then they're presented this story to put themselves in. So they're reading this kind of a comic book format. Like, I'm a big fan of comic books and just that medium of using visuals and words together. And so that's where we came up with this idea of, hey, let's put these images together. Let's make sure that, Sean and Angela are communicating with each other, and let's just let the learner, progress through the story to see the different things that they'll be taught that day, to understand how a new worker orientation will go, because it's something very, very common. And we try to add a little bit of humor to it, to make it not just a click, sit here and click through this. Like, it's actually an engaging story. And then we provide a little follow-up for, fast forward 2 days, and now Sean's run over Todd with a forklift. Okay, now what do we do? So this introduces the idea of, okay, now we got to report this. Thanks for coming and telling us. And then now we got to retrain you because of safety incidents that happened. And then we just provide a little outro, so they understand the kind of why we presented this story. And then they're presented with the course goals, and then they move throughout the course this way. Yes, Andrew.
A quick question has popped up. Does this new worker course or any customizable courseware courses have audio built into them?
The safety ones do not currently. That's why we provide the transcript, so that can be thrown into like a screen reader or a text-to-speech program to get that audio in there. Some of the soft skills courses do have scenarios that provide audio, but we don't have a narration that runs through these right now. So that's the new worker safety orientation, what's in it for me concept. So I'm going to show you now safety attitudes in action. Like I mentioned, this one was a little bit different. So we had this pop up on screen with this question of how much can your attitude really matter? And then we have a question that says, what do you think? And click one of these below. So you click on here and it gives you some feedback. So it allows the learner to take a chance to think about what they're doing and think about their own attitude and then self-reflect on that and provide a response. We also provide these a little later on. Okay, we'll talk about this in a moment, but here's another one later on. So we separated this course into multiple modules. And so the first one was about your attitudes and creating like a safety culture within your organization. And then we moved into talking about different actions that people can take to be safe in the work environment. And again, we provide this self-reflection piece so that they can then think about their own actions, what they should do in this situation and respond to it. And so we use this throughout the course to keep the learner engaged, keep them thinking about what they're doing in this self-reflective kind of pattern. So that way they continue to understand what's in it for me as they're going throughout this whole course. Another question and challenge that we came to was how do we cover a large amount of related material effectively without overloading the learner? Because a lot of this new worker safety orientation, there's a lot of stuff you need to cover. Like if you've ever seen the OSHA guidelines, they're pretty extensive and there's a lot of things that pop up in this. And so we need to provide a way that the learner didn't feel like they were just clicking next and clicking next and clicking next and clicking next, you know, on and on forever, because those courses, as we all know, generally don't provide the best results for the learner, doesn't get what we want across, and just are kind of a torture to go through. And so within New Worker, we set up what we call a subway marker, because we use a section way marker to denote when a new module or a new objective is coming into play. And these are within that section. We want to provide another way to show progress for the learner. So this is kind of in some ways a pseudo gamification aspect as well, because it's showing the learner that they're progressing through the content, but it's not really gamified in any way. It's not really, you don't get points for completing sections, things like that. There's none of that aspect to it, but this is just showing a different way to show progress. And we further kind of went a little bit further with that pseudo gamification in safety attitudes and actions, because we actually set up the actions section as a game show. Again, it's not, there's no points associated, so there's not that aspect of gamification, but it does again show them that they're progressing through the content and shows them where they're at, where they've been, and where they're going. So just to show that off really quick, I'm just going to go back here on slide. So here we have the game show guy popping up. Again, there is an introduction to this whole section with introducing you to our game show character here, who we did not name actually. But it says you have to, he gives you a little quote here, he then tells you to click next for more options. As you saw that animated to reveal, to flip over. So you're thinking kind of like this is very, I don't know, a Family Feud-ish, where it's, you know, flipping over the sign or whatnot. And that's where we took inspiration from. And then you go through the content through here. So we'll just kind of click through here really quick to show you some of the interactions that are available here. And then we have some just basic slides that are providing content. Well, now we get you to the next one. You see that your last point that you just visited is now grayed out. And now you have a new point showing up, and you're showing that you have 5 more points to go. And so it's just showing them their progress as they're moving along. So that way it doesn't feel like they're just sitting there flipping through content, but they're actually broken up in a way that they don't feel bogged down. And this way, if they do have the time and they want to just, you know, step away for a second, they can, and they have a logical marker to do that, and they can come back to it later, things like that. So it just shows them their progress. In new worker, we introduced this version of the subway marker, which is just a column with the different categories of workplace hazards. So we wanted again to show that all these categories are related, but they are all separate, and we want to teach them separately. And so we just move them through the different course. Again, we highlight the one that they're on, let them move through the content and interact with it. And then when they move on to the next one, again, you see where they've just been is grayed out. The next point is highlighted, and again, they're showing that they have 4 more to go. So this is just a way to separate it up so the learner continues to be engaged despite the fact that they're going through a long body of content. It doesn't feel nearly as long as it could have. I'm going to actually go back into present mode. So another constraint that we have is we have to be able to address a wide range of customer situations and need. I'm sure if I took a poll right now of the different industries that you're all involved in, we're going to see some variation. You're going to have some that you're probably like, you have a warehouse where you're training workers. You probably have some where you're just like, no, I just have people sitting in an office in a chair all day. Or you have a mixture of both, or you're out there, you know, there's numerous amounts of different situations we all find ourselves in, and we want to make sure that you're getting all your needs met. And that's a pretty hard thing to do, and just to broadly stroke everybody's needs together because they're all so very different. But that's where the keyword in our coursework comes in, is customizable, meaning that you have control of this content. You can customize it however you want to. And so within New Worker, there's probably stuff in there that you may not need. One example of that is like a PPE section. If you're working in an office, unless you're dealing with maybe like bloodborne pathogens, you're not really concerned about PPE necessarily, because you're not needing a respirator to go to the office. You're not needing to wear a full bodysuit. You don't need to protect your hands really, you know, things like that. So you may just want to pull this whole section out. And so we made Courseware modular to the point where you can just pull it out, take out that whole section if you need to. That includes any of the content in here. Since you have the access to the source file, you're able to just, you know, say, okay, don't need that, or I don't need that much of that content, and pare it down as you see fit. Throughout all our courses are built that way. And that's one thing that we're actually quite proud of, is the fact that we set it up in a way that you have complete control over what content you're presenting, no matter what situation you find yourself in. Another situation that we run into is how to meet course scope, budget, and deadline. So these ones we actually had to produce pretty quickly, like faster than our normal turnaround time, which is already fairly quick, because we need to get these out because we had customers waiting for them. We had a few pre-sales on these that we need to just get them to the customer because they were expecting them, you know, kind of yesterday in some ways. And so how do we deal with that? Well, the nice thing for us with Customizable Courseware is we have a whole body of work to pull from. We've developed over 20 courses, I think, now for safety and numerous soft skills and things like that, where we actually don't have to necessarily come up with new content every single time. So like if I was you as a learning professional, if you develop a course, make sure you can have easy access to those courses that you're developing. So that way any content that you built, if something comes up later on where you're like, oh wait, I can use that, I wrote that, you know, a year ago, I can use that here again, you just go back and pull from it and add it into whatever course you're building. For New Worker, we actually did that quite a bit. We went back to our previous course and said, okay, we need to cover a point about bloodborne pathogens. Okay, well, we have a whole course about bloodborne pathogens that's pretty extensive, very detailed. Some of it's really kind of not fun details, things like that we added into it. We don't need that much content. What do we need? Well, we need like 2 slides. So we pulled out 2 slides, summarized what they needed to know, the key points that we need to take away, put that information into the course, and said, okay, that's what this person needs to know. If they need more, we have this other course that they can take that will fill them in on all the gaps that they missed, just based off the 1 slide summary. And one of the last things that we want to do, and this is purely because we're building a library of courses, and you're probably doing the same thing with your organizations, is we want to create a unified learner experience. So what I want to show you here is 2 examples. As you'll notice, these look very similar to each other. They're the exact same interaction, they function the exact same way. You just click on those icons and it reveals another little piece of information. So our courses are completely templatized, meaning that we have a variety of interactions that we can pull from, that we've built out as templates. Our developers have built them in all 3 tools, and we built them into a storyboard template, which if you want to know more about that, I did a webinar a couple months ago on that. But we now can just pull from that and say, okay, this interaction fits what we want to have the learner do, and we can put that into the course. But we can also do different color variations so that things are separated out. But again, this is the same interaction in 2 different courses, just with a color change. And that helps us keep unity, that helps us keep time down, because we wouldn't be able to develop these as fast as we do if we didn't have this. Like, that was actually a learning process early on in CC. There wasn't as much templatization, and it just took way too long to get things done. But as we grew, we know that, wait, our whole company's built on doing these templates. Let's add that into this, and let's keep using that concept. And we've proven that it works, is that templatizing your templates, whether that's with, hopefully that's with eLearning Brothers templates, or whether that's with templates you built yourself that we provided assets for to help you build, we want to make sure that you have something to pull from, so that way you're not consistently rebuilding over and over again, because building from scratch just takes way too long to get you through. And lastly, so that's our examples from that course. And so just to kind of leave you with one key takeaway from this whole thing, and this is something that that I actually say quite frequently, is yeah, you're constrained. Yeah, you have all of these different challenges that you face. We understand you. We're there. We get it. We face new ones every day that you're probably still familiar with. And it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be, it's just the career that we're in, guys. It's just a creative person's challenge. And that's why I like to say that creativity loves constraints. This is actually from somebody else, but I like to steal this and attribute it to myself. Basically what it says is, yeah, you're constrained, but you have these limitations that you have to work in. Okay, now you have to find ways to work within those constraints, and it can be done, and it's done every day, and you guys out there all do this. And just keep moving forward, using the roadblocks and busters that Chris mentioned earlier to continue developing fantastic content for your organizations. And with that, are there any last questions that we have?
Yep, a bunch of questions have come up about customizable courseware. Does each section end with a knowledge check?
It does.
Excellent, that was an easy answer. Okay, is this content cloud-based?
It's not right now, because right now we do not have a hosted version, but that is definitely in the works. If you are interested in that, please reach out, because we are addressing that literally as we talk to you. So we'd love to learn more about what you'd be looking for and what you would like to see in a hosted version of customizable courseware. Please reach out.
And then the last question, as we're looking at these different customizable courseware libraries and things, can content be licensed a la carte?
So each course, courses are kind of available in different ways. You can buy one course, 5 courses. However, I will tell you, you get a bigger price break the more you buy. That's just how our model works. But you can just say, okay, I just want this course, and just buy that course for whatever that price is. I'm not entirely sure what the pricing is currently, but you can't just buy 1 or 5 or 6, however you want to go.
As many as you need.
Right.
Yep, and I do believe that if you purchase our subscription with our assets and our templates, if you buy the, is it the master pack we call it now? And then what? It comes with what, Andrew? 2 of them? Is that right?
That's right, with 2, and then you can add for a smaller price because you've already bought 2.
Yes.
So it just grows for you.
That's a great way to go, because then not only do you get our customizable courses, but then you get access to our icons and our assets and our people, so that, say if you're working in a healthcare environment and you want to swap Sean for somebody who is dressed appropriate for your environment, you could swap him out for live cutout people that look like your people in your organization.
Yeah, and we do use a lot of our own assets in these courses as well. We do quite a few custom illustrations with Sean and all that, but those are also available to you with those files to pull in and out.
Excellent. All right, so there's no more questions here. I believe you guys have one more slide.
I have one more
me.
slide for you, and it's shiny.
Yes, ELVX Live. So this is an event that's going to come up a week from Monday. So it's I think we're at 11 days right now.
I think
it's coming up quick. June 10th in Salt Lake City. It's going to be at the University of Utah, and it's going to be great. So we're going to have Clint Pulver, Michael Noble, Lena Renee, and Hadia Nuradin there. We're also going to have tons of breakout sessions in the afternoon. Chris, you're doing one of the sessions in the afternoon, yeah?
I am. I'm going to be doing a little mini micro workshop on design thinking. So I've done one as a webinar, but getting to do it live is great because we get to interact and talk with each other and actually bring some more ideas up about particular projects that you're working on live. So yeah, we'll be doing that.
It's going to be a great event. We hope that a lot of you will join us there. You can learn more about that and register at elearningbrothers.com. If you have more questions about customizable courseware, you can also visit elearningbrothers.com, and you can use the chat feature there. You can send us an email, info@elearningbrothers.com. Or if you want to put your information here in the chat or questions panel, we'll reach out to you after this session and get your questions answered. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Chris, for all of this great information. We'll see everybody next time.
See ya.
Thank you all for being here. See ya.